Hello, 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 and welcome to Kindred Skulls. My name is Gregg Blake, and I'm joined, as always, by my lovely, talented, brilliant co-hosts, Matt Freese. How are you this evening?
Fantastic, Greg. Fantastic. You went the wrong direction in the picture triangle on the screen.
Did I?
So, yeah, there you
I was looking at
go.
If you're
There you
listening
go.
audio only, you're missing out on a treat right now. Greg is bathed in the purple glow for the regular season. He's got his sunglasses on. We're ready to rock. So.
I'm feeling good, man. We watched the Bills shellac the defending Super Bowl champions last night.
Josh Allen show was great.
Feeling
Stiff
good.
arming
Still riding.
cornerbacks, defensive backs. It was beautiful.
Football's back, baby. There were so many big plays in that game. It was fun.
So many big players. That was
Positive
an exciting
end,
one.
like so many fumbles and interceptions and bombs and a lot of dinking and dunking, but it was cool anyway because the guys were breaking tackles or Josh Allen was lowering his shoulder into a linebacker or whatever. So fun times. Even the bad games are entertaining. So
exactly. It was bad for like 3/4 of it, but it was still fun to watch, and I think it was a hell of a way to go into the season. And Nick, I'm sorry I didn't even get to say hi to you this evening. How are you this evening?
I'm Nick. You may
That's
have heard
Nick
of
Olson.
me. Probably not.
Is
Good. How are you, Greg?
your Twitter punishment over yet?
No, I thought it was. I thought I was able to get. I've got this stupid. For people who don't follow us on Twitter, I've got this stupid. I lost a bet with Luke Braun, friend of the pod, fellow Locked On Vikings and fellow Zone coverage writer, to who had the most accurate 53-man roster prediction, and I lost. So I had to change my Twitter profile picture to this stupid Joker version of Luke's picture with like Google.com Lola Bunny Rule 34, which is not appropriate. Please don't actually Google that, but I lost the bet, so I had to man up and take it. So yeah, apparently I thought it was yesterday started the NFL kickoff, but no, apparently it's not until Sunday at 4:25 p.m. Eastern because that's this Vikings kickoff. So
Oof.
I get not reading the fine print. So yeah, I'm still in the pillories.
Well, we're all enjoying your purgatory, and
you may have noticed it because I'm becoming increasingly unhinged on Twitter.
Yes, it has turned you into a little bit of a joker, which I think is a great starting point for our conversation today. What are we leading into here, Greg?
Let's lead in. Thank you, Matt, for getting us out of that. So yeah, let's go straight to talking about Week 1. We've got our beloved Minnesota Vikings facing off against our most hated rivals, the Green Bay Packers. To kick off the year, it's one hell of a way to start the season. That game always has major ramifications on how the division plays out, and we got to play it right off the bat before we've even seen a snap of our starters play football. Let's talk a little bit about the game, guys. Let's talk about the Packers themselves, kind of what we know about them currently, how we kind of think this game might play out, and Nick, why don't we start with you? Talk to us a little bit. Oh, you know what? Scratch that. Let's talk about our team first, okay? Just a few things to go over. There's some depth chart surprises. And Matt, I apologize. I know you wanted to talk about that. Let's talk a little bit about some of the depth chart choices going into the game that maybe surprise some people.
Yeah, I guess there's just a couple interesting ones. The other thing we should hit before we go to the game is just a very actually short injury report. It's kind of exciting to see, I think, the limited number of injuries. Obviously, one of the most exciting additions this offseason, unfortunately, Lewis Seen is questionable. He has a knee injury, it sounds like. So I don't know if we'll see him, but we weren't expecting him to start anyway.
Is that... I know he got a little nicked up in the game. Do we know that is related to that?
It might be. I haven't been tracking that super deeply.
They asked Coach O'Connell about it when he brought it up, and he said he just re-aggravated an injury in practice. So he actually didn't practice today. I think he was like a limited participant Wednesday or Thursday or something. And then was like downgraded to did not practice, and he's questionable for the game. But I don't know. Kevin O'Connell seemed to made it seem like it's just a little, tiny little aggravation of a previous injury, and it just kind of popped up. And I think O'Connell's like quote was he truly is questionable, but I kind of wouldn't be surprised if he didn't dress or something, just because they're probably going to want to be safe with him. And then
Bullard is
Bullard, I think, was a limited participant, but is questionable. I kind of expect him to be fine. So,
Yep. And Bullard, as we mentioned, was one of kind of the depth chart surprises, right? Obviously, the team traded for Ross Blacklock after cutting Armand Watts. We talked about the surprise of the Armand Watts cut last week, and then the surprise of the Ross Blacklock trade. But obviously, I think, and this is something we talked about last week. Bullard played really well in the preseason. I think, particularly the San Francisco game, he didn't play a ton of snaps, but he really showed out pretty well in the limited number of snaps that he did play. So I think he showed enough that they were comfortable having him play base downs for the Vikings, which again, we're not going to see Jonathan Bullard on the field for 70-something% of the snaps, right? I expect it to be under 50% of the snaps when we're in base situation, when the opposing offense is in heavy personnel, and we have to have 3 interior defensive linemen in Bullard, Dalvin Tomlinson, and Harrison Phillips, right? Otherwise, you're going to see Phillips and Dalvin Tomlinson on the field, and then I'm sure we'll have some sort of rotation on passing downs because Phillips and Dalvin don't really give you the most pass rush juice in the world. That'll actually be pretty interesting to see. But the other kind of depth chart surprise that I have that I'll term it is that Caleb Evans was actually over Andrew Booth Jr. on the depth chart. He was solidly the, I guess, 4th corner on the depth chart, right? Because Booth was listed in the same area as Boyd, and you have the 3 starters in Chandon Sullivan, Patrick Peterson, and Cameron Dantzler above that. So it was kind of interesting to see, the 4th round rookie over the 2nd round rookie, who Nick and I both like a lot. I just think, he's had some injuries in camp. Caleb Evans got a lot of run. I think that might be contributing. And, Booth isn't the most consistent player in the world, so maybe they saw some more consistency out of Evans during camp and all that.
yeah,
Booth's got some room to grow.
I've made this comparison before, but Booth reminds me a little bit of that rookie corner with Jeff Gladney, who had like a very up and down rookie season. Obviously, unfortunately, passed away, but he was a guy who I thought had a very high potential, but wouldn't necessarily want to throw into the fire as a rookie, just because you'll get some highlight level play, but you'll also get a lot of lowlights. And I think you kind of saw that with Booth in the preseason. Evans was a little more steady Eddie. I'm not sure he has quite the upside. I mean, I think he's a pretty sticky cover guy, and I think he'll do fine if you have to throw him into like mostly playing quarters and stuff. But like in terms of like true shutdown man potential, I think Booth has a lot more of that than Evans. But for right now, where they are on the depth chart, if they have to throw somebody in because somebody gets nicked up, I think it makes sense to see Evans come in. And that it might just be nothing. It might be Booth anyway. Booth wasn't on the injury report despite having that pretty nasty looking injury in the preseason. So Booth is healthy by all accounts right now and should be ready to go. And so it wouldn't surprise me if Booth were the guy that they went in there and this was just like Pittsburgh accidentally put Kenny Pickett 3rd on their depth chart when he was the clear backup and is probably going to take over midseason or something. So teams don't necessarily put that much thought into it, so I wouldn't put too much weight into it. But at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if Evans. I would expect Evans to be the 4th guy who rotates in when they need to.
I have another question about the team before we start talking about the Packers a little bit here. Matt.
Yes.
Did you see my guy, Kevin O'Connell, talking up my other guy, Brian Asamoah, this week on the?
I did not catch any of KOC's press conferences this week, so
it wasn't a press conference.
The Vikings Entertainment Network thing, yeah,
with Pete Burgess.
Yeah, I mean that's what you like. Absolutely, that play is an example of what you like about him: his ability to shoot the gap and get under the offensive lineman, but I do think long term it becomes a concern when he's trying to play action. That's the only thing I would say is obviously in the Vikings produced segments, they're going to talk about the positives of the players and only the positives of the players, right? I think that's very much positive, and I like that a lot about him, but he's going to need to temper that with being able to play action is the only way I would respond to that.
Okay. All right, let's talk about the Packers a little bit. Whatever.
I'm sorry to rain on your parade a little bit there, Greg.
No, it's good. All right, so obviously the elephant in the room always is Aaron Rodgers. What's Aaron Rodgers thinking? How's Aaron Rodgers feeling? Who's Aaron Rodgers going to marry? Blah, blah, blah. Look, The guy is still, unfortunately, a top player in the league. I thought maybe he was on the decline a couple years back, and that clearly is not the case. Will he ever go away? I guess is the question. And how do you guys feel about Aaron Rodgers coming into the season here, and particularly this game?
I mean, he's the reigning two-time MVP, so you got to give him some respect. He's really freaking good, and I'm not sure he's going to necessarily decline anytime soon. I mean, we've already seen Brady. Brady's doing it, and he's 45. So, whereas previously you would expect him to, maybe it's the HGH or whatever. But yeah, his game is going to age gracefully. The real question here is, what does this Packers offense look like now that they've traded away Davante Adams? And it really seems like Allen Lazard, who is going to be their number one wide receiver. He's not Davante Adams. He's not, can't fill those shoes, but he was going to be their number one guy going into the game. Is doubtful. Listed as doubtful on the injury report. He didn't practice all week. It was reported he got stepped on, so I don't know what happened. It's a knee injury too, so I don't know how somebody steps on your knee, whether that was a dog pile or what. But in any case, they're going to be without Davante Adams. They're going to be without the guy who was supposed to take in the shoes of Davante Adams. So right now it's like Sammy Watkins and Romeo Doubs and who's the other like tall skinny? Christian Watson is ready to go. We haven't seen anything from him. They're the guy they traded up with us to take. So they've got some guys, but it's like all these guys are like good at running like vertical routes, and they can't turn. Like they're not ambi turners, they're not mono turners either. They're just like run fade routes. So they're going to build the whole train out of four verts and then throwing it underneath to like Bob Tunyon and those two good backs that they have. So I think this will be an interesting case study in like what matters more, like the quarterback or the receivers, because Vikings fans have certainly seen the wide receivers elevate mid-tier quarterbacks or even backup caliber quarterbacks like Case Keenum, the famous example, throwing to Stephon Diggs. Adam Thielen made him look really, really darn good. And we've seen really good quarterbacks look really bad with really bad wide receivers. I think to like Cam Newton. So it'll be an interesting test because Davante Adams is so freaking good, but at the same time, Packers have like won every game that Davante Adams has been injured with. So I'm really interested to see what like Matt LaFleur, mad scientist, tinkers up with his offense. I think he's changed a lot of how they look. So it's interesting because I don't think they wanted to trade Adams. They were willing to pay him. It wasn't like it wasn't a money decision. It was an Adams wanted out and wanted to go play with his old BFF Derek Carr. So they going from Adams, which was the guy they planned. Literally, it was the first read on the majority of their passing concepts. Just like he was the star of the show, like more than anybody else in the NFL. To go from that to nobody, and then going into Vikings week 1 and not even having your substitute number one guy. So they're really running on fumes, I think, in terms of passing targets. So we'll see what they do if like Aaron Jones is the leading receiver, if it's a lot of swing stuff underneath or what. But for me, Aaron Rodgers, he's still going to be really good. But how good does really good look if your wide receivers are trash, can't catch, and can't really run routes? So and are all like young and like don't know the playbook yet too. So
yeah. It's going to be a really interesting combination to see, right? Because we actually have two examples of this kind of across the NFL if you include Kansas City. Now, they do still have Travis Kelce in Kansas City, so maybe that makes a difference. The Packers experiment is kind of the more pure experiment of do wide receivers matter at all, right? Because with Allen Lazard, doubtful, I mean, like over 90% of doubtful players end up being out for the game and not playing in that game. So it probably is going to end up an out designation. And Allen Lazard, who is not a player that I think is phenomenal by any means in the first place, right? He's played for the Packers for however many years, and he hasn't been a consistent contributor. Now, part of that is due to Davante Adams, but part of that is...
The new number one, Matt.
Yeah. He's the new number one. Yeah, he's going to produce like a number one wide receiver. I just don't think that's true.
I mean... these guys are big and they're fast, and that's what like kind of the Packers want. Even like Sammy Watkins, these guys are big, they run fast vertically downfield. I don't think they're necessarily like the shiftiest guys. They're not Stephon Diggs. They're not even like Cooper Kupps that are going to shake you out of your shoes. But what they do, they release well off the line of scrimmage and they have good upfield burst. And I think that's something that I'm a little concerned about because we already saw like Patrick Peterson get burned by Danny Gray against the 49ers in joint practices. Cam Dantzler, he's a great wide receiver. He's a great cornerback with the one exception that he ran a historically slow, not historically, but like very slow 40 at the combine. So his speed is not his game. So If there's one thing that scares me a little bit, it's the risk of those explosives, especially in like it's easy to like dial up quarters coverages, concepts to exploit that where you're kind of one-on-one on a vertical route on the outside corner or whatever. So I can see like Rodgers, and Rodgers is also like money with those shots, like deep downfield, drops it right in the bucket perfectly. So I can see Vikings giving up some explosives vertically in the passing game. But otherwise, yeah, these guys don't scare me that much receiving wise. Like Rodgers is elite, and we no longer have Mike Zimmer neutralizing Rodgers.
Yep.
Rodgers always said like Zimmer was the hardest guy I had to ever go up against, game planning against him. But not having Devontae Adams, not having those other receiving weapons, I think no matter how good your quarterback is, you got to have guys who can get open and can catch. So
yeah, so
that much.
It'll be interesting to see if the scheme from LaFleur can help overcome that, right? Because obviously LaFleur has all of the Shanahan chops, right? Or that's his upbringing kind of in that world, where honestly they don't need otherworldly receivers to get guys open and to have them make plays to create yak opportunities for fast wide receivers, even if they aren't great linear movers. And Rodgers can put the ball literally wherever he wants. Like if Aaron Rodgers wants to make a throw, he's going to be able to execute it at any level of the field, and he's still shown the ability to do that these past 2 seasons. Like his arm at 39 or however old he is absolutely absurd, and it's frustrating to go against, right? So I think that it will be a test of what the Packers are able to do on the passing game side of the ball, and it'll be really interesting to see what the Packers have evolved their offense into because Devontae Adams was such a focal point of the offense, right? Maybe we see more of the Shanahan run game, that outside zone or heavy doses of run to try to set up play action, to try to set up crosses over the middle, that sort of thing.
Let's talk about that a little bit. So the sense I'm getting from you guys is generally we're not super, we at least don't really know what to expect from that receiver group. We know what to expect from Aaron Rodgers, but it's a question of will those two things gel? Certainly no reason to expect it to gel week 1, right? It might take some time for them. Especially because none of them have played snaps together yet at all, just like our offense. So receiving game, maybe we're not so afraid. Let's talk then about the running backs. Okay, we know these running backs well. Aaron Jones has torn up the league. He's probably one of the more underrated running backs in the league. I certainly underrate him because he's a Packer. We also have behind him the big, strong A.J. Dillon, who's probably could, a lot like Alexander Madison, could probably start on another team or two in this league. So you got 2 really strong backs back there. Let's talk about the ground game a little bit. Let's talk about the offensive line. Do we think that Matt LaFleur is going to be capable of creating some kind of power run offense? Because that's certainly not what you think of when you think of the Green Bay Packers.
So I think he's going to be fully capable of creating an efficient offensive run game. Now, I think the question is execution up front, right? You mentioned the offensive line a little bit there, and this plays into pass protection too. I think it might play into pass protection more so than even the run game, because we mentioned Allen Lazard. The other big injury news from the Packers is that both David Bakhtiari and Elton Jenkins are questionable for this game. David Bakhtiari, my understanding is he didn't practice today, Friday, or was that yesterday? Like, he was a non-participant in practice, which is usually a bad sign for whether or not a player is going to play. We kind of mentioned that with Lucine earlier. I believe Elton Jenkins did practice after as a limited participant as well. Nick, do you know?
I think they were both limited all week.
Yeah, well, my understanding is that Bakhtiari, they both participated in team drills all week, and Bakhtiari specifically did not participate in team drills today. We're recording this Friday evening.
David Bakhtiari is the captain of the injury squad.
Well, for the past 2 years, it's been brutal for him, and we don't
like that guy's been hurt his entire career.
I don't know. He's a phenomenal left tackle when he plays.
Tough sledding lately.
Yeah, yeah. He's an absolutely phenomenal left tackle when he plays. He was the best pass protector in the NFL. I think the last time he played a full healthy season, which might have been 2020. It might have been 2019. It's been a tough past couple years for him for sure. Elton Jenkins obviously is another phenomenal player, a very versatile lineman who they're expecting a lot from. The Packers offensive line got a lot of hype. Zach Tom, I think, got a lot of hype, but he's actually lower on the depth chart than the preseason hype would have predicted. So they are going to be working down a little bit with the players, and I think that's something our defensive line can take advantage of in both the pass and run game. In terms of I think just having Dalvin Tomlinson, Harrison Phillips clog up run games in the middle, having Zadarius Smith, who apparently has a very big grudge against the Packers, which we found out today. That's really fun. And Danielle Hunter looking to get back and just kind of wreck stuff along the defensive line could be really exciting for the Vikings for this game. In the run game for the Packers specifically, I do really like both of the two backs. I mean, we've seen what Aaron Jones has been able to do, and I think he may be a large contributing factor in the passing game as well as the run game. He might be the answer because we've seen games when Devontae Adams is out and Aaron Jones gets like 4 receiving touchdowns or something. Like the way they've been able to deploy him out of the backfield in the passing game is something that's been really impressive. AJ Dillon, I mean, he can carry guys, right? He's a massively built dude. I think he does a really good job reading run lanes. Like they're both pretty good disciplined runners. They both have the abilities to make people miss in contact in different ways. Obviously, Jones is more of a shifty back, and Dillon kind of runs through people and get yards after contact for both of them. So it's definitely something to be concerned about from the Vikings end. But I think we do have the defensive tackles to match up with the interior offensive line of the Packers, especially with the injuries that we've seen.
Nick, do you have anything you'd like to add about the running game?
I'm interested to see what kind of run game plan they put together here. And I wouldn't be surprised if this team leans away from the wide receiver personnel groupings and leans into having 2 very good backs who I think you can use on the field at the same time. Not necessarily as like a lead blocker. I'm not sure that's how you necessarily want to use them. But I think Aaron Jones has shown time and again, he's actually, he's not like a good route runner, but on wheel routes downfield, he's very dangerous. And LaFleur is very skilled at finding ways to get those to come open by breaking your coverage rules a little bit. So I think you can get both running backs out there. It's funny, they actually only have 2 running backs on the roster right now, so they don't have a third. And they've also rostered 4 tight ends. So I think they're prepared to go heavy. And I think the Vikings are prepared to this is like the meta is like the more stretch runs people do, the more odd fronts we see, and the Vikings are ready to throw up Jonathan Bullard there. And I'm kind of interested to see if LaFleur is coming up with a counter to that counter now. So these teams are schematically, these teams are really interesting because they're kind of mirror images. They're both McVay disciples, McVay offensive coordinators who became head coaches, and they're both Fangio tree defensive coordinators. So they run a lot of the same stuff on both sides of the ball, and it's kind of about like who's going to be the next step of evolution. Where are both of these schemes that are taking over the NFL going to go from here? So I'm interested to see what happens.
Yeah, totally agree on that. I'm always a little dubious when coaches talk about the 2 running backs on the field at the same time. I feel like I've heard that before, and it doesn't actually happen.
It's been talked about for years and years. Basically, nobody ever does it, but the Packers actually have the personnel situation to like pull it off at this point.
I would honestly
also lack the wide receivers that usually you don't put in a running back at wide receiver because it's like even like a Christian McCaffrey is doesn't compare to a pretty good slot receiver or whatever in terms of running routes and stuff, and that's the elite type receiving backs, whereas the Packers, do you really care that much about taking Sammy Watkins off the field and putting it for them, their best 5 weapons might include both Jones and Dillon. So I don't know. I'm interested. I wouldn't put anything past LaFleur because I think he's a really creative offensive coach.
To be clear, I would like to see it, even if it's the Packers doing it, because I'd like to see if it can even work. Because I just feel like we never have actually seen a team commit to that idea. And there's a lot of running back talent in the league, and I think if you could find a way to make that part of offenses, I think it could be really interesting.
LaFleur uses all these big bodies. I mean, that's their prototype at wide receivers. Those big 220 pounds, 6'4" guys who can really move bodies in the run game and match up with safeties and maybe even linebackers in the run game and blow guys off the ball that way. And then so the idea of getting all these guys heavier out there, I could see that becoming a big part of their screen game or a big part of how they get the ball out and how they get blockers in front of them. You can do that with the screens, or you can do that with other ways. So like quick passes to the flat or whatever. So I'm kind of interested to see how they, what weapons they decide to prioritize here, because I kind of If this is actually like going to be Randall Cobb and Sammy Watkins and Alan Lazard all year, I'm not sure it's going to be a three-peat for Rodgers at MVP. But I don't want to doubt him or challenge him or anything on that too. So we'll see.
Yeah, don't wake the beast.
I think we'll definitely find out some answers on Sunday.
I will not mock the belt.
Okay, let's talk. Let's talk very briefly about the Packers defense. Just this is probably, we talked so much about the offense. We talk about Rodgers. We talk about the defense is probably. Am I wrong in saying that might be the strength of their team this year? How do you guys feel about the Packers defense?
I think it very well could be. So I mean, it's kind of an interesting game because I think we'll learn a lot about what the Packers are going to try to do on offense, and we'll also learn a lot about what the Vikings are going to try to do on offense this year. I mean, I think we have a pretty good idea just based off of O'Connell's McVay history and that sort of thing. But we haven't seen us use a fullback at all in the preseason. Obviously, CJ Ham is going to get snaps for this team. We haven't seen a whole lot of two tight end stuff, which is something we did a lot last year. Maybe that's something Kevin O'Connell tries to lean into more. And obviously, just seeing Justin Jefferson and Kirk Cousins and Adam Thielen and KJ Osborne in this offense is really exciting from the Vikings side of things. But on the Packers defense, I mean, I think it has a lot of talent. I'm really frightened, I guess, and this is something that's been consistent in Vikings-Packers games that we've seen. Their defensive line has tended to dominate us, and we've gotten crushed a couple times by them in the past few years, and it's been Kenny Clark wrecking shop, basically everybody on that defensive line kind of shutting down the entire Vikings offense. And I think they have the personnel to still do that. Obviously, with Zadarius Smith gone, they lost a piece there, but they still have Kenny Clark. He's still really a really dominant nose tackle. They've got Dean Lowry. The edge rushers, Rashawn Gary, I don't think is at, peak Zadarius Smith level, but he's improved significantly since coming in the NFL, and maybe he'll take another step forward this year. They still have Preston Smith there, who's a quality player. At the second level, Quay Walker, I think we made fun of them during the draft because it was such a reach, but he's a very he's a physically gifted player, right? And that could lead to some concerns. Obviously, they are also banking on Devondre Campbell playing at the elite level that he played at last year with the contract that they gave him. The one area of the Packers that everybody seems to love, like on a national level, that I'm not as in love with is the secondary. People talk about, obviously Jair Alexander is a phenomenal corner, right? And people talk about Eric Stokes and Darnell Savage, and they love both of those. Like on a national media level, you'll see people talk about Stokes and Savage, and they love them. I think, it does hurt the Vikings that Kevin King is no longer a starter for the Packers. Like that was very beneficial for us for the past few years because he's really bad. So Eric Stokes is good in that sense to me, in my opinion, because, he's an upgrade over what Kevin King gave them. But I still think, he was a rookie last year, obviously a first-round rookie, and he had his ups and downs. I think that might continue into this year, and I think Darnell Savage is a little bit overrated in the national media perspective because he's kind of a jack of all trades, but I don't think he does anything at an elite level. Like he's a very exciting player who's fast and makes big plays, but I think the consistency you probably want to see more. So I think there are some areas that we can exploit on offense in the Packers secondary. Now, I could be very wrong, and these guys who are also very talented could take the next step and kind of dominate and blanket everybody across the league. But I think our opportunities to exploit weaknesses on the Packers probably come in the secondary and in the passing game.
I agree with a lot of that. I think on paper, this is the best cornerback room and arguably the best secondary, taking into account the safeties as well in the entire NFL. But also at the same time, I have a lot of it's easy for me to see that. Like if Jair comes back and doesn't miss a beat, if Rasul Douglas adjusts to being the nickel star guy instead of just being a boundary guy, just fine. If Eric Stokes takes a step forward from an up and down but impressive rookie season, for a rookie, Savage learns to put things together, and Amos doesn't drop off because he's 30 or whatever. That's the best secondary in the NFL. But that's each of them has a conditional attached to them. Amos is getting older and is. I would say is no longer as good as he once was, even with Chicago. Darnell Savage, I don't think is a good player. I don't think he's bad, but I think People salivate, I think, over his potential and athletic traits, and I think he's one of those first rounders that so far hasn't really lived up to his billing. And I could see it happening, but he processing wise, I feel like he's always like maybe a tick slow, and he relies a little bit more on his athleticism. Jair Alexander, like he missed so much time last year, and like wasn't able to come back because like of lack of conditioning or whatever. So he's to me, he's like the 1B to Jalen Ramsey at 1A is like the best cornerback in the NFL when he's fully healthy. But it's been, you can't guarantee that he's going to come back, especially at the cornerback where it's so hard to be so consistent. Like even Darrelle Revis, he had that '09 season, and then the next year it was a big drop off. I mean, it was still a good cornerback, but it was a big drop off. It's just hard to Xavier Rhodes 2017, and then like 2 years later he's off the team. So, or he drops off a lot. It's hard to maintain consistency.
That margin for error for cornerbacks is like so thin. And you're absolutely
and we
right.
saw Jalen Ramsey, who's still a great player, have a terrible game last night against a really phenomenal receiver in Stephon Diggs, right? So it's not like even game to game, these guys, it's so hard to be consistent at that position in the NFL.
We don't appreciate great cornerback play enough.
The front seven, I think, is good, but I don't look at it as the strength as its defense. It's interesting that they chose to keep Preston Smith over Zadarius Smith. I can only think that was because of health. Because I don't think Preston Smith, he's like if he's your second guy, he's good. But Rashawn Gary, PFF hypes him because he got like their fourth best grade last year, but maybe I'm biased because Brian O'Neill kind of took care of business for the most part against him, but like I don't necessarily see he's a very good pass rusher, but I wouldn't put him in the elite tier just yet. He's very good though. And then their interior guys are obviously you think of Kenny Clark, but he's another guy who's like how long is he going to keep this up now that he's kind of on the latter half of his career? If he's matched up against one-on-one against Garrett Bradbury, I think we all know who that's going to go. But if they can get a double team with Ed Ingram in there, which I think is how it'll look most passing downs or whatever, or Ezra Cleveland if he's on the other side, I think that's I'm not too worried about that. So. And these linebackers, Campbell obviously all pro. I think he's very talented. I think he's earned that with his length and he can do a lot of things with his range. And Walker is like a very talented athlete, but I'm not sure he's more than just an athlete right now, especially when you're thrown up against, I would say, an offense that wants to exploit linebacker matchups. Like this is what got Cooper Kupp to be the Triple Crown winner last year was McVay and Kevin O'Connell were like, how do we get our tight end how do we get Higbee out on the edge to match up with Jalen Ramsey so that Cooper Kupp can be lined up one-on-one and take on your poor linebacker on a choice route. So I think we're going to see a lot of that being exploited in the game plan. And that plus the play action and exploiting the coverage rules and exploiting the run fits and all that I think is going to go into the game plan. So it's a really good defense on paper, but at the same time, I can certainly also see the Vikings putting up a lot of points on there because I think there are ways that you look at this and can clearly see pressure points.
Absolutely. I think what we have on Sunday is a matchup of two teams with a lot of very similar question marks, and we haven't seen a lot of starters on either team play. It should be I think it's going to be a messy game, but I think there's going to be a lot of really interesting highs and probably a lot of lows mixed in there. Let's do predictions really quick. All right, Nick, who wins the game on Sunday?
On Twitter, I've been doing my whole doomer bit. Right now, the market has the Packers favored by 1.5 points, which actually doesn't sound that bad. But if you think about the fact that this is, it's in Minnesota, so we get a little bit of a bump from that, 3 to 4 points. Vikings actually get, fun fact, one of the biggest home field advantage bumps because of how, good job US Bank Stadium fans who go there to the games because Vikings get a big bump from that. I actually think the Vikings are going to pull away a win here. I don't know. If I'm like getting lured into believing in Kevin O'Connell when he's done nothing yet to prove it, but just I feel like everybody who actually talks to him like off the record one-on-one about ball is like it's always like blown away by this guy. It's always like it's nothing less than glowing reviews from everybody who talks to him. So the fact that people are so impressed by Kevin O'Connell, like when Kwesi hired him, the report was like everybody was blown away by him, and you've seen I think I've heard that by like the Star Tribune said that. I think Nate Tice at The Athletic said it, just last week or something. Like everybody's just like, wow, this guy like really gets it. So I'm really excited to see if Kevin O'Connell can take those scheme elements that just unlocked Matthew Stafford last year and do the same thing with Kirk Cousins. Because I think you look at the weapons on this team between Jefferson, I think has an argument to ascend to the very best wide receiver in the NFL, plus Thielen. And, if KJ Osborne and Irv Smith are your third and fourth options, that's a pretty darn good at passing attack. And then you throw in Dalvin Cook, arguably a tier 1 running back right now. I feel like this offense has the potential to put up a ton of points. Yes, we have questions about the offensive line, but Darisaw, I think, is taking a step forward. Is he going to be a Pro Bowler? Maybe not, but I feel like if you got the tackles locked down and you've got Ed Ingram, who has a chance to be a solid starter, I wouldn't, he's not going to be amazing out there, but a solid starter, this is an offense that's going to put up points, and the defense has, the question with the defense has never been, can they be good or not? It's can they be healthy or not? Well, right now, at least for now, knock on wood, they're all healthy. Daniil Hunter, Zadarius Smith, Eric Kendricks, Harrison Smith, they're all healthy right now. Everybody in the secondary is healthy. So, minus Lewis Cine, but all the starters are healthy. So I feel like this defense has the potential to be average. And, if you get an elevated Kirk Cousins, a frick you Kirk Cousins with an average defense, I think that's a recipe to win, especially at home coming out of the gates. With Kevin O'Connell, he's kept everything state secrets locked up, so I think he's gonna unleash a lot of the magic sauce here in this game. So I think the Vikings come out strong. I think they win this one. So goodbye,
so Nick picked the Vikings.
Homer Nick Olson is back.
So Nick picks the Vikings. Matt, who wins the game on Sunday?
I've got the Packers. I've got the Packers -1 or minus 1.5, and I know that sucks. I know I kind of talked down on the Packers for a little bit, but I do think that their defense has an incredible amount of talent. And that is a concern for me. Obviously, the secondary is very talented. We'll see how they match up with our wide receivers. This is not a game I'm super confident in picking, right? Because there are just so many question marks leading into the game. We talked about for the Packers wide receivers, the Vikings have an entirely new coaching staff for the first time since 2014, right? There's not a lot of things that are certain. None of this roster, that we're going to see on Sunday has played football since probably even before week 18 last year, right? Because I don't remember how many starters. I guess we played starters in week 18 last year. But none of this roster has played meaningful football in a very long time. And I think that will lead to a little bit of rust. Now, I don't think the Packers have started many guys either, but they've got Aaron Rodgers and we have Kirk Cousins. So for right now, I guess when it's close to me, I'm going to take the better quarterback. I kind of have to.
Yeah, I'm with Matt on this one. I feel gross about it. I'm taking the Packers in week 1, but this is more of a challenge to Kevin O'Connell and this new thing we have going.
If we beat the Packers, I am all the way in, baby.
Absolutely. I'm laying down the gauntlet. I'm saying, look, you guys beat the Packers, week 1, your first game. I'm in. Let's watch how this goes the rest of the year. But I need to see it. That's where I'm coming.
I'm not sure if my
mentions all week have been full of people like, why do you even write for the Vikings, Nick? Like, if you're just gonna be so negative, like, why don't you just go cover the Packers? And here I am saying, like, I think the Vikings are gonna win by 2 touchdowns. And here I am being the only one to pick the Vikings. Well, this is for all the people in my mentions right now being like, why don't you have any positivity? Well, bits and jokes aside, I actually really do believe in the Vikings. I think they pull away with a win here. So. You negative Nancy's can stuff it. I'm all in. Don't take away my right to have unrealistic expectations for the Vikings this year. It's my God-given right as an American, and I'm going to stick with it.
Absolutely. I think Greg and I are just doing some emotional hedging over here, so that's where we're at.
I'm just putting up the wall, getting it built early in the year, just kind of like getting the foundations in place. Let's talk a little bit. Okay, guys, good stuff. I feel like we have a pretty good handle on this game coming up. I think it's going to be really fun to watch. I'm excited to watch it. Let's talk a little bit about just generally the rest of the NFC North. There's going to be plenty of time to go into detail about rosters when we come to their games, but let's just talk about our NFC North opponents really quickly and just your general sense of the state of these teams. Let's talk about the Bears first. Matt, why don't we start with you? What's your impression of the Bears so far? And just like I said, just generally.
I don't think this is necessarily like their new front office, who we very nearly had as our front office. is doing a bad job necessarily, but they are very clearly stripping the roster down to its nuts and bolts, and I'm concerned because Greg, I think we recorded on this podcast, or we had, there is a recording out there of us on the draft when the Bears took Justin Fields, and we were absolutely devastated, right? We both really liked Fields as a prospect, and I still like him as a prospect, but I think what they've done to support him is almost criminal if you want him to succeed in the NFL. Now, from a long-term roster building standpoint, I get it, because they had a lot of bad contracts, they were in a rough situation, but trotting out a rookie 5th-round pick as your starting left tackle is pretty rough. Trotting out Braxton Jones, who was a rookie last year, who was like a 6th-round pick as your starting right tackle, is a very tough situation. Their wide receiver core, I like Darnell Mooney, but he's really the only interesting piece in that wide receiver core for me. Like, Byron Pringle's like an okay player to put on a football field. Velus Jones Jr. was a joke of a draft pick. I mean, I don't think that was a very good pick at all. To be honest with you, he's more of a special teams player that you're taking in the 3rd round when you need wide receiver talent on that team.
30 years old. Yeah. I couldn't believe it. When I saw his age, I was like, "Are you kidding me?"
So I mean, I like David Montgomery as a runner, but their offensive roster and supporting skill position talent is just very bad. On defense, I think they've got more talent. Like, Roquan Smith obviously is a very good player. He's in a big contract issue. He's not a big fan of the front office right now. Eddie Jackson might need to get revitalized a little bit. Jalen Johnson's a pretty good, pretty promising corner. I wouldn't say he's quite there yet. But really, they're missing a lot of their defensive line talent that's given us fits. Now, the depth of their defensive line has given us fits over the years, too. So that's not to say that none of the talent is still there. But the 2 biggest guys, Khalil Mack and Akeem Hicks, are both off of that roster now. So really, it's kind of a bare bones team, and I don't expect much from them. Now, Justin Fields is a good enough player that I think he can drag them to a few wins if he plays up to his potential, but I just don't know if they've put the supporting cast around. I've got a lot of questions about Luke Getsy, who was from the Packers as their offensive play caller. Matt Eberflus, I think, is a solid defensive coordinator, but I don't think he was as high of a level as you'd expect from somebody who gets a head coaching job, honestly. Like, he wasn't putting out like Mike Zimmer and Cincinnati level defenses, right? He wasn't putting out the types of defenses you typically expect from defensive coordinators to get head coaching jobs. Now, that could be because of, his off the field personality and how he is as a leader in part and that sort of thing. But like, I have a lot of questions about this team, and I don't think they're going to be very good.
Who knows better than us that the best way to help a young quarterback is to hire a defensive-minded head coach? That's the best way to do it. Nick, what's your general impression of the Chicago Bears, just generally?
Similar to Matt, I won't deep dive on it, but they're not trying to compete this year. They're not trying to lose games, but they're just kind of thrown out. They're gonna see what guys are out there. They're gonna scour the waiver wire all year, and they're gonna see if they can find any diamonds in the rough. But they're not gonna blow their cap space on this year trying to compete. They're clearly stripping it down to the studs, seeing who can sink or swim, and seeing who can be a building block long term. So we'll see if that includes guys like Roquan Smith. We'll see if that includes some of these young wide receivers, Velus Jones or Byron Pringle, or if Mooney can take a step forward, which I certainly think is possible. Justin Fields throwing in the ball. Fields has incredible tools, both like athletically as a runner, but especially as a passer. He's an exceptionally accurate passer. He throws a beautiful deep ball. But kind of like Kellen Mond, I don't think he has the ability to play in structure very well or on time very well. So if he can just figure that out, which is way easier said than done, but if he can figure that out, like, that can be a quarterback you build around it. And I thought their offensive line looked like one of the worst I've ever seen, but it started to kind of, like, in the last few weeks, kind of come together. Like, they signed Riley Reeve, who's not good, but he's a lot better than like most backup right tackles or whatever. And Evan Jenkins, it seemed like he was on the 3rd team, and all of a sudden he might be starting, or I guess he's not starting right now, but he's like
I believe he's starting a right guard for them.
Yeah, I saw there was some like hullabaloo today that like Bears fans were mad that like he was being replaced by somebody else in the depth chart or whatever, or like for practice. So there's more Tevin Jenkins drama. I don't know where that's going, but in any case, he's not being traded away for peanuts anymore. So, and the point is, like, they've got the offensive line doesn't look terrible. Most of this roster does look terrible. They're not trying to win, but they have pieces. Like Jalen Johnson, I think, is a very good young corner. Jaquan Brisker, I think, has a chance to be a good safety for them. I kind of like some of their draft pieces, some of their young pieces. I think it's very possible we look back to the Vikings and the Bears in 5 years and look at the Bears and see like we should have done what they did and stripped things down to the studs and tried to instead of extending all these 30-year-old guys. But at the same time, like I think the Bears fans are going to have a pretty miserable season. So
Yeah.
You're not. I'm
not a good
not
team.
adding anything to that.
Yeah, like I think they're probably making a smart like team building decision this year, but it's not going to be good for results in the football field.
Yeah, and that's how you rebuild, in my opinion. But anyway, let's move on to let's talk about the Detroit Lions a little bit. Everybody's very familiar with this team at this point. Everybody watched Hard Knocks. There's not a lot to discuss here other than just what's your general impression of the team? Do you feel like the Lions have started to solve some things over there? Matt, what do you think?
I mean, I like Dan Campbell a lot as a coach. I think his
I
personality.
love him.
I mean, I think that his personality, with the level of care that he shows, and he's not going to be the softest on his players, but like maybe it'll end up being a bit much, right? And schematically, they need to have the chops to be able to make it work. I think there are a lot of nice pieces on this roster. Their offensive line is very, very talented and very, very good, in my opinion. Their defensive line, they've added a ton of talent in the past couple of years as well. So that could be pretty impressive if Aiden Hutchinson turns out, and it sounds pretty good for him. You know, Outside of the trenches, I don't know if they have a ton of pieces. Obviously, Jameson Williams, they drafted. He's not gonna start right away. Jared Goff is not, who you want starting on your team. So they'll need to go somewhere else to find a quarterback eventually. It's not a team that's going to be necessarily fully playoff competitive this year. I do think in winning with trench play, that's a pretty significant boon to your team. It can help you overperform, even if, they don't have the exciting skill talent or whatever. Particularly, the secondary looks pretty weak, and the linebacker core, I don't love at all either on the defensive side. But
Rodrigo?
go ahead.
You don't love Rodrigo?
From an entertainment perspective, yeah, I think he's awesome. But I think maybe he's more on the Josie Jewell scale of things, as an NFL player than somebody who's going to be a star football player. You know what I mean? Somebody who's very smart, who's always in the right position, but maybe doesn't quite have the requisite athleticism that you need to be a high caliber NFL linebacker. Like he can be a starting caliber one, but I don't think he can necessarily be a high caliber one. So, from that perspective, I think there's a lot of good bones for the team. And with the state that they were at the roster after Matt Patricia, like it's been a very good job that they've done trying to turn this around so far, but they still have quite a ways to go.
Sure. Nick, do you agree with all that?
Yeah, the Lions are interesting to me because like schematically they impress me, but the talent roster wise, I think they are a very bad roster, and I think they have good pieces, but the good pieces are all at positions that don't matter. Like Ragnow has an argument for best center in the NFL right now, but center is it's the position you pay the least out of any of the offense or defensive starters on your team. So, like T.J. Hawkinson, I think is a good tight end. I don't think he's an elite tight end, but he's a good all around wide tight end. But like unless you're Rob Gronkowski, that's not like a super valuable position. So I don't like their wide receivers. I don't like their running backs. I think Goff has an argument for like worst quarterback in the NFL. Certainly worst quarterback contract right now. I think given that the Rams had to pay the money to get rid of it. Yeah, and then defensively, people talk up this offense. I don't see anything in this offense to get me excited. Like people talking up DJ Chark as if he's going to go for like 10 touchdowns. I don't know, man. Like I get that, like he's if maybe he's healthy right now, he can amount to something. And anytime you have one of those guys who can really succeed as a vertical receiver, it doesn't take many explosive plays to start racking up the stats. But I just don't see it. Amon-Ra St. Brown, like yes, he had a strong end to the last season, but like that's because somebody had to catch passes from Jared Goff, and the rest of the receivers weren't good, so might as well have been him. So I don't know. And then defensively, the defense is, I think, as an argument for like the least talented defense in the NFL. I know people are excited about Aiden Hutchinson, but like, look, he's a rookie. All these rookies that they have, like Jameson Williams is going to be out for a lot of the year, I think, and when he comes in, he's going to be a rookie wide receiver who hasn't practiced yet. So. I get why people are excited about what long term they're building. I think they have a plan. I like Brad Holmes. I like their entire coaching staff, like from top to bottom. But I just don't. I think they are bereft of talent. So I don't take them super seriously. I wouldn't be surprised if they like surprise people and won a few games here and there, but like this is not a good team. I don't expect them to do anything, and I don't expect them to like be contenders anytime soon either. So
I would disagree with you slightly there. I think they're a little bit above teams like the Bears and the Giants and the Texans in terms of the level of talent they have on their roster, which is very much an upgrade from last year, where obviously they finished with the second overall pick. And I just think that they have added more talent to this team. They're still not, in my opinion, a playoff competitive team, but they're in like the 6-10 range as opposed to the 3-14 range of a football team right now to me.
Sure. Good stuff, guys. I think we kind of hit our NFC North opponents really well here. I only have one bone to pick with anything that either of you have said all evening. All right? Nick, I don't ever have to respect Aaron Rodgers, okay? Ever. Never, ever. All right. Let's you guys want to do takes? Let's move on to takes here. Let's talk about let's do our top 3 hot takes for 2022, okay? We've all thought about this for weeks, and we're fully prepared for this segment. And let's, Matt, why don't we start with you? Give us one hot Vikings take for 2022. You can call it prediction, whatever you want.
One hot Vikings take. All right.
And
the
2
Vikings
hot NFL takes.
The Vikings have 3 first-team All-Pros this season on their roster. Justin Jefferson, Danielle Hunter, Greg Joseph.
Okay, I like it. Give us 2 hot NFL takes.
All right, 2 hot NFL takes.
An elite Vikings kicker.
Yes, an elite Vikings kicker. Let's go. I'm all in after that 58-yard field goal. Are you kidding me? Anyway, going back, NFL take. Take number 1. Your 2022 Super Bowl champions, the Baltimore Ravens. I think Lamar is in a contract year. He's going to be on a war path trying to get as much guaranteed money as he possibly can. I think that with all of the injuries suffered last year, they're going to bounce back. I love their secondary. They have the most talented secondary in the NFL. That's why I'm picking them for the Super Bowl this year. Second hot take. This is way out of left field. I can't say that I actually think this is going to happen, but Christian Barmore, Defensive Player of the Year.
Whoa, okay.
I love Christian Barmore. I think he was fantastic for the Patriots last year. I think he can be a dominant force in the middle. I think, people are tired of TJ Watt, whatever. People are tired of Aaron Donald.
Baltimore winning the Super Bowl is way farther out of left field than Christian Barmore winning that award.
And I love the Bills. I think the Bills are the most talented team in the NFL, but how often do we actually see the most talented team in the NFL win it?
Yeah, that's fair. Nick, give us one hot Vikings take for 2022.
All right. Continuing on my Nick the Homer, not the Nick the Doomer take, my hot and spicy Vikings take for you right now is the 2022 NFL Coach of the Year, Kevin O'Connell, baby. Lock it up. He's going to win it. He's actually, this is not Homerland. He actually has the best odds of anyone out there right now on Bet Online. And I checked DraftKings, and he has the second best odds of anyone in the NFL. So people are excited about Kevin O'Connell. It's not just rumblings in the background. It's not just crazy people. I think people are very excited about what Kevin O'Connell can do. And you look at the weapons on this roster, it's very easy to envision, a McVay guy coming in, building on that scheme with the weapons he has, putting Justin Jefferson and putting him in favorable matchups like Cooper Kupp, getting the most out of Dalvin Cook, and kind of elevating Kirk Cousins to a higher tier of quarterbacking. And I think it's very easy to make the case for Kevin O'Connell. Even if the team is only like 10-7, I think Kevin O'Connell has a very strong, if the Vikings are a playoff team, I feel like Kevin O'Connell, and I think they've got a very good shot to be. I think Kevin O'Connell gets a lot of the credit, because I think part of that is, I think no matter how good Kirk plays, I think Kevin O'Connell is going to get a lot of that credit, even if it should go to Kirk. And I feel like, and when you're coming off like the Mike Zimmer hangover of like a defensively minded head coach, I think like all the offensive success is going to get credited to the new guy. So I feel very good about Kevin O'Connell's Coach of the Year. So there's my Vikings homer take. For NFL
That
takes,
is a solid.
I have an even spicier hot take, but it's Viking centric. So I'll just throw this out there like bonus take for you. I still got my 2 other takes, but bonus Vikings hot take: Zadarius Smith 15 plus sacks in 2022.
Jeez, wow.
It sounds hot and
Wow.
spicy. It sounds hot and spicy, but listen to me here. Okay, so Danielle Hunter, we all know Danielle Hunter's the 1A on this team, but Zadarius Smith is the roamer. He's the spinner. He's the guy who they will match up on the weak link on the defensive lines. Zadarius Smith is the guy I think that they're going to bring in to be like the attack against their weakest link. And Hunter, I think, is just going to he's going to be the guy that kind of sets up Zadarius Smith to clean up a lot of the time.
Yeah,
so I think
Smith's going to be the finisher. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're both going to get sacks, but I think Zadarius Smith, I think, is in a very favorable setup. He had over 100 pressures last time he was fully healthy, so I feel like Zadarius Smith. Don't be surprised if he puts a big time sack production in 2022. Don't even be surprised if he leads the league. If you want to go extra ultra,
right.
Ghost Pepper Spicy, leads the league in sacks. There you go.
Get to your NFL ones, Nick. Let's hear your NFL ones.
I fully shedded Homer Nick. I'm kind of leaning into the bit now on the opposite side of the spectrum. Okay, other hot spicy takes. AFC West. I have the Raiders. I have the Raiders winning the AFC West, not the Broncos. It's a stacked division. They got a lot of other teams there. Obviously, the Chiefs. They got the Chargers. Those are all the darlings. I think Patrick Graham, Josh McDaniels are going to come in. They're going to unlock a lot of those players on that defense. They got maybe the best pass rush duo in the NFL between Chandler Jones and Max Crosby. Very, very good edge rushers. They're going to get a lot of pressure up front. And then on the offensive side of the ball, it's kind of very similar to the Vikings, actually. So you can paint a similar story. Derek Carr, a talented quarterback, but now he's got Devontae Adams that he's throwing to on top of Hunter Renfrow, who, people I think Hunter Renfrow gets a little underrated. He's an exceptionally good guy, getting kind of like a souped up Chad Beebe for Vikings fans.
They've got weapons. They've got weapons for days.
Yeah.
He's underrated because of his showy body.
You want to double up Devontae Adams, I think they're completely fine if you want to put, somebody one-on-one with Darren Waller or somebody one-on-one with Hunter Renfrow. So, and I feel like Josh McDaniels gets underrated for what a good offensive mind he is. So, the rest of the division, Chiefs traded away Tyreek, and Travis Kelce, I think, is over the hill. He's no longer as fast as he used to be, so he's no longer like the matchup weapon he is. Chargers, the Chargers are going to charger. Brandon Staley's going to find a way to wind up being 9-8 at the end of the year, and everyone's going to be like, how the hell did that happen? And we'll say, well, that's how the Chargers always are. And Broncos, I don't know. Like they lose Von Miller and things don't necessarily gel right away. And Russ turns out to be the same limitations in Seattle might also come into play in Denver. So yeah, I see there's a path for the Raiders. I think they're probably still long odds. I wouldn't necessarily make this bet, but I like the Raiders' chances to surprise people in the AFC West. So that's take 2. I'm going long here. So my third take is I have a third take. I'm not stalling here. My third take is Eagles are the number 1 seed in the NFC. Okay. That's my third take.
That's becoming an increasingly popular one recently.
Yeah. Well, you look at the talent on their roster and Jalen Hurts is not the guy necessarily, and we don't expect him to be the guy, but he's another. I guess the theme of all my takes today are if you put a lot of good enough weapons around good enough quarterbacks, you can get a very good team. And if you take all the weapons away from a very good quarterback, whether that's Aaron Rodgers or Patrick Mahomes, I feel like you're going to pay the price for that. And I feel like, that might be the story with Jalen Hurts, because you bring in A.J. Brown, an elite receiver. You add in, the rest of, they already had a pretty good wide receiver core there. And you're able to build in, have a B+1 in the run game with him. And then you add all the talent they added on defense this year. They just added Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. They have, I think, arguably the best secondary in the NFL. You put that all on top. They're very deep with their defensive line. And they also have an exceptionally easy schedule ahead of them. I can easily see the Eagles being the number 1 team in the NFC, not because they're the best, but because maybe they have an easy path ahead of them. So those are my hot takes.
All right. Okay. You got increasingly spicy there, and I think the Eagles one kind of calmed it down a little bit. But I don't know. Let's see what we got from Greg. I love Gregg's takes.
I'm going to stick to the bit.
I'm
going to give you one Vikings take. It's okay. Look, I'm not going to be the downer on this show all year. I promise you. Okay.
Oh, great.
If we see signs of life immediately, I will start to be way more positive. But my hot take.
Oh no.
It was so hot.
It was so hot that Greg jumped off the call. This is phenomenal.
There we go,
Welcome back, Greg.
Hot, Greg.
Greg, your take was so hot that you had to leave the call. Your house literally caught on fire.
Like, we can't allow this to be broadcast. We have to take this off the air. The FBI, just nip that in the bud.
Oh my God.
Reread my take a couple times. Make sure I feel strongly about it. I feel very strongly that the Minnesota Vikings this year are a classic Vikings squad, which has weeks where they seem like they're going to be a Super Bowl type of team, and have weeks where it's not quite clicking. And my prediction this year is that the Minnesota Vikings lose a heartbreaking divisional game late in the season, which takes us just out of the playoff picture at 9-8. That's my prediction.
Is that even a hot take?
Vikings
That happens like every single season. Jeez, is that even
That's
hot?
like where my expectations are set, Greg.
Hold on, I want to double down on this, because the reason it's a hot take, I have never seen our fan base more confident in someone we haven't seen coach a single game. And I love everything you're saying, Nick. I'm not criticizing you. I'm just saying we have not seen a damn thing yet. I need to see it.
You know what would make that take hot? If you said it was specifically going to happen week 18 against the Lions. We play the Lions week 18, right?
Well, wait, you stole my thunder, baby. Because my two hot NFL takes are, okay, let's get the easy one out of the way. I cannot believe also that everyone has forgotten so much about the team that has almost dominated the AFC for years at this point. My pick for the Super Bowl champions this year is the Kansas City Chiefs. I think people have completely forgotten about these guys. I think they've gotten stronger across the board. I think Pat Mahomes was actually covering for a lot of weaknesses in that roster last season. I think that they have rearmed themselves. I think that their receiver room is actually going to be a little bit better than people think. I also really like the running backs on that team. I like the Chiefs. I like the Chiefs a lot.
Greg, you're a big Clyde Edwards-Helaire fan. Put it down in writing.
I also
Greg,
think
big
Pat,
fan of Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
I also think
Greg is giving me nonstop. We'll get into the 15 seconds fan. Go ahead, Greg. I won't derail us any longer.
I also think Pat Mahomes looked really good in preseason, so I think he's going to come out firing. But my hot NFL take of the year has to do with your Detroit Lions. I think that the Detroit Lions are this year's, and by the way, I felt this way before Hard Knocks, but Hard Knocks made me feel way more like this. I think the Detroit Lions are this year's Cinderella team. I think that they might be, in fact, that divisional opponent that knocks us out of the playoffs. I think that they are going to be way more competitive than people expect. I love that coaching staff. I love what they're doing there. I do agree that they have a lack of talent.
What's your hot take here, Greg? What's the hot take? What are they going to do?
Hey, man, I just picked the Lions the playoffs, and you're going to tell me that's not a hot take?
Well,
when was the last time the Lions made the playoffs?
You didn't say the Lions are going to make the playoffs. You said they're a Cinderella team.
I thought that was implied. I believe that the Detroit Lions are the Cinderella team this year in the NFL. I think that they're the team that makes the playoffs. I think they're the ones who knock us out of it with a heartbreaking loss at the end of the year. That's my hot take, baby. I think the Lions are going to the playoffs. I can't even believe I'm saying it.
That would be very Vikings to have the lowly Lions knock us out of the playoffs for their own playoff spot. That would certainly fit the bill.
Yeah, I could just hear the PA call now. Like,
oh my God, it'd be horrible. It would be absolutely horrible. Prepare yourselves. Okay, this was a great episode, guys. We hit everything. I'm really looking forward to the game this weekend, and I know you are too. But guess what? You can't escape our segment. Okay, you can't escape it. It's time for 15 seconds of fantasy. Ladies and gentlemen, we know that you don't want to hear us talk about our fantasy teams, but we desperately want to talk about our fantasy teams. And that really just means I desperately want to talk about our fantasy teams. So every episode, we dedicate 15 seconds of the episode to talk about our fantasy teams. Each guy gets 5 seconds. Nick, why don't you start us off?
I mean, Greg, you said it yourself. You really like Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the Chiefs running back room, and I have to agree. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to surprise people and put up lots of points and be a very productive running back.
The Bills defense got me 18 points yesterday. Also, Alan Lazard out. Sammy Watkins, wide receiver 1. He's on my team, everybody. It's Sammy's year. It's Sammy Watkins' year.
I am going to pat myself on the back because when we talked about Packers receivers, not once did I mention Amari Rodgers today. All right, guys, this was a great episode. It was so fun talking to you. Matt, where can people find you on Twitter?
At Fries Football.
Fries Football. Nick, where can people find you on Twitter?
Nick Olson NFL. Just find the distorted Luke Braun profile picture. There I'll be.
Look for the weird photograph. The avatar. You can find me on Twitter or on Instagram. I'm a little bit more active on there at You've Been Gregged with 3 G's. You can find us on Twitter at Kindred Skulls. You can find us also on YouTube. Our video content is always posted on our channel. You can find that by searching for Kindred Skulls on YouTube. And guys, any last words this evening?
Skull Vikings.
Skull Vikings. Get it? It's my skull. Skull Vikings.
Thank you, Greg. We needed that. Have a good one, everybody.
Cool, baby.
The first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. And we'll all cheer on behind. And we'll score the